she screamed during our anniversary dinner. I faked every time. You're pathetic. I quietly transferred every dollar into my account while she was still yelling. The fallout that followed destroyed her reputation, but gave me peace I never knew I needed. Our anniversary dinner was supposed to be a celebration. 5 years together, through cramped apartments, late-night ramen meals, job layoffs, and those small victories that felt huge at the time, like buying our first couch that wasn't from a sidewalk pickup. I'd booked the restaurant weeks in advance. White tablecloths, quiet corner table, the kind of place you save up for when you want to mark something special. She looked stunning that night. Red dress, hair done in a way I knew she'd spend hours on. For a moment, I thought maybe this was it. The beginning of a new phase where all the fights and sharp words we'd exchanged lately would be softened by nostalgia and hope. But the thing about truth? It never sits still. It finds a way out, even if it has to rip through a silk evening like a knife through paper. It started small, her sighing dramatically when I ordered wine instead of cocktails. Then her scrolling through her phone while I talked about a project at work I'd finally finished. I ignored it. I'd learned to. Over the past year, she'd become sharper, quicker to humiliate me in front of others. "You don't know what you're talking about," she'd said once at a barbecue with her friends. Another time, after I'd worked overtime all week, she'd called me a glorified errand boy because my promotion hadn't come through yet. Still, anniversaries make fools of us. We want to believe the date itself will hold meaning, that the number of years can outweigh the weight of what those years contained. Halfway through the meal, while I was cutting into steak I could barely taste, she leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and with a smirk said, "You know what? I faked every single time. Every single time. You're pathetic." The words dropped like broken glass onto the tablecloth. People nearby turned their heads. My fork froze midair. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't ask her why she'd say something so cruel in public during what was supposed to be a night of celebration. Because here's the thing. I already knew who she was by then. I'd been watching. What she didn't know was that in the weeks leading up to this dinner, I'd been preparing. Her spending had been reckless, using our joint account like it was her personal piggy bank. Spa days, emergency shopping sprees, money sent to friends that never came back. I'd quietly opened my own account. I'd rerouted my paycheck. I'd been calculating. So while she smirked at me across the candlelight, waiting for me to break, I just said, calmly, "Check your bank app." It took her a second. Then she reached for her phone. A frown, a tap, then another. Her face drained of color, lips parting but no sound coming out. The joint account, the one she treated like an endless fountain, was nearly empty. The balance mocked her. I'd left just enough to cover bills for the week. The rest was safe, in my name only. The restaurant grew quieter around us, the kind of silence that happens when people know they're witnessing something raw, something ugly. She started shaking her head, then shouting about how I'd stolen from her, how I was abusing her financially, how everyone here was a witness to my cruelty. Her voice climbed until staff had to intervene. A manager approached, then security. People at nearby tables whispered, some recorded on their phones. I stood, placed my napkin on the table, and thanked the staff for their patience. I didn't look at her again. Not when she screamed my name. Not when she accused me of ruining her life. Not when security gently asked her to leave. Walking out into the cold night air, I felt lighter than I had in years. But don't mistake that for triumph. There was no joy in it. Just a numb kind of clarity. The person I'd trusted most had been rehearsing her betrayal for months, maybe years, and tonight was simply her chosen stage. And me? I'd chosen my exit. When I stepped out of that restaurant, the night air cut into me like ice. It wasn't just the cold. It was the sudden awareness that the weight I'd been carrying for years was gone. But what I didn't expect was how quickly the emptiness would get filled with noise. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone had over 20 missed calls. Half from her, half from mutual friends. Texts stacked up, ranging from, "You can't just walk away like that," to, "Everyone saw you humiliate her. You owe her an apology." I didn't reply. Instead, I did something boring, practical, unromantic. I opened my laptop and started organizing. Screenshots of bank statements. Copies of text threads where she'd admitted spending joint money behind my back. Photos of packages delivered that I hadn't known about until charges hit. I even uploaded the restaurant receipt with the timestamp, just in case her version of events somehow twisted into me storming out without paying. It might sound cold, but when someone shows you how far they'll go to hurt you publicly, you learn fast that self-protection isn't paranoia, it's survival. Around midnight, she finally got through on a call. Her voice was hoarse from crying or screaming. I couldn't tell. You blindsided me, she spat. You stole from me. Do you even understand how that looked? You walking out and leaving me with nothing. I kept my voice level. You had everything you needed. You just thought it was endless. You're pathetic, she shot back, echoing her line from dinner, but this time it didn't land. There was no audience, no candlelight, no smug grin, just a hollow echo in the dark. I told her calmly that I'd left enough money in the account to cover rent for the week, that I wasn't abandoning bills, and that she'd have time to make her own arrangements. Then I ended the call. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of notifications. Screenshots were flying around on social media, blurry clips from the restaurant, people posting about a meltdown at table 7. She hadn't wasted time. She posted a long status accusing me of being financially abusive, of humiliating her in public, of taking away her independence. Here's the thing, perception is a weapon. I could have fought back online, but I didn't. Instead, I quietly sent the relevant screenshots, her own texts about using my paycheck for her shopping sprees, to a few mutual friends who reached out privately, confused. I didn't rant, didn't smear, just context. And slowly, the tide turned. People stopped sending me angry DMs. Some even apologized for jumping to conclusions. Meanwhile, she ramped up. She showed up at my apartment 2 nights later, pounding on the door, alternating between sobbing and threatening to ruin me. I didn't open. I called a neighbor to witness her behavior from the hall. Then I documented it with time-stamped video. Because here's the reality. When someone has no shame exploding at a public anniversary dinner, you have to assume they'll escalate when the audience is gone. What surprised me most wasn't her anger. It was her desperation. She left voicemails about how she never meant it, how the restaurant comment was just a joke that came out wrong, how she needed me to fix this because her family was asking questions. She went from fire to ice in the span of hours, rewriting the script as though I'd forget the live performance I'd already endured. In quieter moments, though, I felt something unexpected, grief. Not for her, but for myself. For the years I'd spent rationalizing away every red flag, the subtle insults, the dismissive gestures, the way she always needed me to shrink a little so she could feel taller. That grief was heavy, but it wasn't paralyzing. It was clarifying. I started therapy again, something I'd abandoned years ago when I thought things were fine. I focused on work, on friends who didn't make me feel like a backup character in my own life. I cooked my own meals, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to taste the small joy of feeding myself with care. She, meanwhile, spiraled. Mutual acquaintances mentioned she was furious that everyone took his side. She even tried contacting my family, spinning her narrative. But she didn't know one thing. My parents had been at that restaurant too. They'd been seated 3 tables away as a surprise for our anniversary, something I'd arranged quietly. They'd seen the whole scene unfold. I hadn't planned it this way, but her mask hadn't just slipped. It had shattered in front of the only people whose opinion she couldn't manipulate. The irony? For all her claims about me being pathetic, about faking everything, the only performance that night was hers. And it ended when the curtain fell with security walking her out. And I realized I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to win an audience. The quiet truth, backed by receipts, was enough. Update 1, IT didn't take long for her to switch tactics. The meltdown at the restaurant was all fire and fury, but once she realized I wasn't coming back, her strategy shifted to something colder, more methodical. Exactly 1 week later, I got an email from an unfamiliar law office. At first, I thought it was spam, but when I saw her name in the subject line, notice of financial misconduct by my name, my stomach tightened. The letter accused me of improperly transferring joint marital funds for personal gain. It demanded I return the money immediately and in full or face civil action. Reading it, I almost laughed. Almost. But my pulse still quickened, because even when you know the truth, seeing it twisted into legal language makes you doubt yourself for a split second. Thankfully, I'd been preparing for this. Weeks before the anniversary dinner, when her spending sprees escalated, I'd quietly consulted with a financial advisor. He had explained it clearly. A joint account means both parties have full legal access. If the money going in was 95% mine, which it was, via direct deposit from my paycheck, I was legally entitled to move it. No theft, no misconduct. I took a deep breath, forwarded the email to the lawyer I'd already retained, and attached PDFs of every bank statement for the last year. Every paycheck deposit from my employer, every rent withdrawal, and then, like breadcrumbs, her constant Amazon charges, salon visits, and gifts for friends that conveniently showed up on Instagram later. Her contributions? Maybe 2 or 3 small transfers from selling old clothes online. In total, less than 2% of the account's inflows. My lawyer's response was simple, almost amused. This is posturing. She's trying to scare you. Let me draft a formal reply. And she did, 2 calm paragraphs citing the law, attaching the documentation, and politely but firmly rejecting the claim. No anger, no grandstanding. Just facts. I should have felt relief, and I did, briefly. But relief doesn't last when you're dealing with someone who thrives on chaos. When the legal threat didn't land, she pivoted to the social battlefield. Within days, mutual friends began texting me things like, "She says you drained the rent account and left her stranded. Is that true? She told us you embarrassed her in front of her entire family. What actually happened? Man, I don't know what to believe. She's saying you've been controlling the money for years." It was surreal. People I hadn't spoken to in months were suddenly investigators in a trial I hadn't agreed to. She was out there spinning her narrative, painting me as some petty tyrant who'd cut her off financially to punish her. And for a moment, I almost broke. I wanted to shout my truth online, post screenshots, expose everything. But then I remembered, people forget loud drama. They remember quiet, consistent truth. So I didn't rant. Instead, I selectively sent evidence to those who reached out privately. Screenshots of her own texts admitting she'd borrowed $600 for emergency shoes. Statements showing the account inflows were exclusively my salary. A video from a neighbor of her pounding on my door at 1 a.m., screaming that I was ruining her life. The responses shifted quickly. Wow, okay, that's not what she told me. Damn, I'm sorry, man. I shouldn't have assumed. She's been asking people for money lately. I think she's spiraling. Her story started collapsing under its own weight. That's when she tried the soft approach. One night, around 2 a.m., she left me a voicemail. Her voice was low, almost tender. "Hey, I don't want to fight anymore. I just want us to start fresh. Forget the dinner, forget all of it. You know me better than anyone. Please, can we talk?" If I hadn't lived through the last year, maybe I would have melted. But hearing it now, it was just another script. And I couldn't ignore the fact that this was the same person who, just a week earlier, screamed in a crowded restaurant that I was pathetic and that she faked every single time. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. That was intent. So I saved the voicemail, labeled it, and archived it with the rest. Evidence, not temptation. Meanwhile, my parents, who had been secretly seated a few tables away at the anniversary dinner as a surprise, told me something that shifted everything. They had seen the entire scene. Every word, every expression. They didn't interfere because they wanted me to have control over how I handled it. But now, they were witnesses, neutral and unimpeachable. She didn't know that. And that was the final nail in her attempt to rewrite history. But here's the strange thing. While she exhausted herself with lawyers, gossip, and crocodile tears, I felt tired. Not victorious, just tired. I wasn't chasing justice or vindication anymore. I didn't need her friends to believe me, or the internet, or even my parents. I had the receipts, the truth, and a calm sense of finality. In therapy, I told my counselor, I don't want revenge. I just want peace. And for the first time in years, I felt like peace was actually possible. Final update. It's been 6 months since that night in the restaurant. 6 months since she screamed across a candlelit table that I was pathetic. 6 months since I tapped a few buttons on my phone and quietly moved every dollar I'd earned into an account with only my name on it. Looking back, I don't regret a single decision. Not one. Because here's what happened. Her fallout. Her first line of attack, the legal threats, evaporated almost immediately. My lawyer's response, combined with the thick folder of bank statements, ended that chapter faster than she expected. But she wasn't done. She leaned harder on her performance skills. Social media became her stage. She posted cryptic captions like, "Imagine giving someone everything, and they just take," Take. Lesson learned. Some men can't handle a real woman. Broke boys will always be bitter. And for a while, it worked. She gathered a pity circle, people who wanted to believe her curated misery. But here's the thing about living publicly, the truth leaks out. Mutual acquaintances, people who had once defended her, started messaging me screenshots of her private requests. She was DMing friends asking for loans. She'd been late on rent twice. Her credit card company froze her account. The independent, fiery woman she performed online was buckling under the weight of her own choices. The final crack came when her employer found out about the drama. Apparently, she had a habit of venting about me at work, loudly, sometimes in client meetings. HR sat her down. Warnings turned into probation. Probation turned into termination due to unprofessional conduct. She didn't just lose me. She lost her job, her reputation, her financial cushion. My silence. Through all of this, I stayed quiet. Not silent in a cowardly way, silent in a deliberate, surgical way. I didn't comment on her posts. I didn't counterattack. I didn't send mass texts explaining my side. Instead, I lived. I went to work. I went to the gym. I caught up with friends I hadn't seen in years. I read books. I sat in coffee shops and wrote in a journal like I was 20 again. Every time she tried to bait me, with another voicemail, another late-night text, "Do you ever miss me?" Be honest, I filed it away in the same folder as all the others. Digital artifacts of a life I'd left behind. And eventually, she stopped trying. The turning point. 2 months ago, I saw her by accident. It was at the grocery store near the self-checkout lanes. She looked thinner, paler, and for the first time in years, uncurated. No perfect makeup, no performative smile. Just tired. Our eyes met. For a moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with years earlier. The version of her that was kind, funny, and warm. But that version had been buried so long ago under layers of entitlement and venom that it was like glimpsing a ghost. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. Maybe an apology, maybe another accusation. I don't know. Because I nodded politely, bagged my groceries, and walked out. That was the last time I saw her. My present. People always expect a grand finale in stories like this. That she hit rock bottom in some cinematic way. That I moved on to a perfect relationship, the revenge glow up. The reality is quieter. I'm not with anyone new yet. I'm not racing to prove I've won. I'm simply steady. My bills are paid. My home is peaceful. My nights are calm. My therapist calls it reclaiming neutrality. After years of turbulence, I don't crave fireworks. I crave stillness. And I have it. What she lost versus what I gained. She lost the game she thought she was playing. She wanted control, spectacle, a public war. She ended up with isolation. Me? I gained something she couldn't imagine, clarity. The knowledge that love without respect is poison. The confidence that I can draw boundaries and keep them. The piece of a bank account with only my name on it. Not just literally, but symbolically. She screamed about faking intimacy. I don't even think about that anymore. Because the real intimacy, the kind that matters, is honesty. And she couldn't give me that. So yes, her story crashed and burned. But mine? Mine just began again, quietly, cleanly, on my own terms. And that, more than revenge, is the truest form of freedom.